Hey there everybody, we're going to, for this video, walk through a couple of upgrades that I've done to my Athearn GP9. This is a Genesis model that was released many years ago. I've had it for probably 10 years or longer, and there's a few shortcomings with it. We were in to update the LEDs, as you saw in a video before, and we got that done, and in the process I noticed a couple of things that I wanted done. Most notably was I wanted to correct the 3-pane all-weather window. There was a 2-pane on there before, and I noticed also that the on this engine, the engine had on still the factory footboards that were molded onto the shell. And for most of BN service, or most of the service life of this engine as a green unit, that locomotive would not be correct with footboards on the front and the back. So I've cut those off and I'll need to repaint. And I'm also going to walk you through doing the job with the all-weather window. So then what I did is slathered a tiny little bit of CA on the back side of that detail part from Athearn, the 3-pane all-weather window, and touched that up with a little bit of black, polyester engine black. I touched up the places where the footboards were on the pilots, and also I painted that glad hand, or the trip pin from the Kadee coupler black. I know it's that trip pin is a lie, but I'm an operator, so I'm going to leave it on there. And we're going to paint the tip of that trip pin silver to kind of represent the trainline hose. I know it's not right, but so as soon as you guys can come up with an HO scale figure that can walk in between the train and hook up the hose, I'll start cutting off my trip pins, and we'll do it your way. So I have here a bottle of just cheap hobby store acrylic paint. This one is a sterling silver. We just want something that's going to sort of replicate that look of that metal fittings at the end of the trainline hose. We only need a tiny drop to do both ends. So I'm going to shake this up a little bit and dump on a post-it note. Disposable, easy, and clean. So I'm going to dab my paintbrush in that and then clean it off just a little bit before I go on the end of the coupler. And what I'm going to do is just dab a tiny little bit of that on both sides. I've got a piece of packing foam here. I believe this was electronic equipment in a box, like Cisco equipment or something like that. And the foam over the top of that, and a Lazy Susan down below, so I can move this around easily. I use this often for airbrushing as well. I just want that very tip of that coupler painted. I'll probably do the other end here. Maybe roll the engine over so I can get both sides equally. Again, we're just looking for that look. At the end of that black trainline hose, we painted that acrylic black before. That was just cheap hobby paint we used on that as well. And I see I've got some handrails misaligned because I had it laid on the side on that foam there. I'll fix that later. And you can see that silver did get covered on the other side of that trip pin. Looks nice there. Looks nice here on this end. I'm going to want this done for all my engines and cars and stuff after doing this. And I'm going to do the same thing with the white handrails here, like I mentioned. I've got cheap hobby paint here that I'm going to use. And again, dropping a small drop or two of that on a post-it note. Disposable, easy, clean. I know this won't stick here, but it'll at least make me feel better having done this. So here's my basic airbrush weathering setup. I've got my Pache 2-stage airbrush. My power it, run air through it from a very small homeowner compressor. I've got a bigger compressor in the garage, but I don't run air down here from that. It is a little noisy, but you may hear that in the video here. The other tools, I've got a, I think that's a Badger paint mixer, gravity cup for the airbrush, Poly-S Roof Brown. This is my favorite flavor for airbrushing, and we'll just put a light coat of this on this engine. We don't want to make it too dramatic. a bottle of straight distilled water, Windex in this cup for cleaning up the airbrush, also water, I guess, obviously, for cleaning the airbrush, new pair of dishwashing gloves, and obviously the engine, the item to be painted on a little box riser on a Lazy Susan, so we can spin that around and shoot as we need. Again, we're just going to go for a very light coat here. And maybe I neglected to mention this, but it is nice to have a paper towel around to catch the drips as they come off of the paint mixer, because you want to clean that up as you get done, so that doesn't get too messy. I'll fill my gravity cup out of the Poly S bottle here. We don't need a whole lot in there. And then grab my airbrush from around the corner here. I like to run the airbrush at about 35 to 40 pounds at the tool. There's a regulator that comes with this little compressor, and that works out pretty well for most things, both painting the solid color and weathering. Sometimes you need more, sometimes you need less, depending on the viscosity of the paint. Sometimes, typically, if the paint is a little thicker, I run a little higher PSI. If it's thinner, I run a little lower PSI. So as I was saying, that compressor is pretty small, but what it lacks in size, it definitely makes up for noise. I hope to have this taken care of by the time that compressor kicks back on again. So what you always want to do is test to make sure you spray pattern on something that you don't care about before you get started with the airbrush, just so you don't get a bunch of unexpected goop on your model. And what I'm really just going for here is to kind of knock down the sheen on that black around the bottom, the trucks especially, and the fuel tank, that area. Sometimes I tip it over just a little bit to get around the corner there. And really, that's just mainly what I'm looking for here, especially the pilot ends down the step wells. And then, of course, we want to knock that sheen down on the roof line of the engine too. Nice looking engine, but we want to knock it down just a hair or two here. And again, we're just want to do this very lightly. It's easier to put more on than take it off later. Looks like we're getting really close to where I want to be on this. Again, tip it over to get the sort of underside of that fuel tank. Maybe the backside of the cab there a little bit. I didn't treat the windows. Ordinarily, if I was concerned about it, I'd either mask the windows off or apply a little Vaseline, but we're going to apply such little weathering here that it's not going to make much difference. The EMD GP9 is a 1750 horsepower diesel-electric locomotive introduced by General Motors in the 1950s. This particular example would have been gone to work for the Northern Pacific and then on to the Burlington Northern in 1970. As best I can tell, this engine spent nearly its entire career in the Pacific Northwest on the Burlington Northern. This was common practice among this railroad. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe for more, and we'll see you in the next one.